Hey, darlings. A widow cried alone as she walked at night, mourning the death of her husband. As she turned the corner, she turned pale when she saw her husband enter a dark alley. Marisol Torres was a very strong and determined woman. Despite being consumed by sadness over the loss of her husband, found the strength to take care of his son Luca, who was barely years old. Every day she religiously looked at the last note left by her late husband. The words gave her strength to move forward with life and be strong. I love you, my love. Trust in yourself. The note said they were the last words he left her before dying during his workday as a police officer after losing him. Marisol's black hair was dull. Her brown eyes were lifeless. Even her dark skin seemed matte with sadness rushed by her hectic routine. He kept the paper in his wallet while he hurried his son to go to school. Let's go, Luca. We can't delay. No, he asked when looking for his son's backpack. Yes, Mom, I'm coming, Luca responded, appearing on the stairs. The son was so similar to his deceased husband that she felt immediately happier when she saw the child. He had the same gray eyes as Alejandro, a memory of the man Marisol loved. As Marisol hurried down the busy street at her son's side, each step a reminder of the void left by Alejandro. Maybe this will happen, she wondered, trying to push away the pain that seemed as fresh as the day she received the news of her husband's death. Marisol was distracted, walking down the sidewalk with her son when her eyes met his. Of a stranger who could very well be the living image of Alejandro. The man was identical to her husband, and when Marisol saw him, she froze with her heart beating uncontrollably. It couldn't be, she whispered to herself, feeling a mixture of hope and despair. At that moment, Luca tightened his grip. Mom, are you okay? Her voice was full of worry, bringing Marisol back to reality. Yes, dear. I'm just a little tired, she responded, trying hard to smile, but her mind was already spinning, full of unanswered questions. At first, Marisol thought that she was going crazy. It must be a mirage, she thought to herself. However, after a few steps, Luca also manifested himself. That's Dad? Asked his son, so happy that Marisol began to think that they were both hallucinating when they saw the man. No, Luca, your dad is with Los Angeles, she said, with a trembling voice. Why don't you go to school? I think your teacher will love it. Seeing the drawing you made, he continued, handing the backpack to his son without taking his eyes off the man, just like Alejandro. It's true. Dad left with Los Angeles. I will make another nice drawing for him to see from the sky, said Luca before saying goodbye to his mother at the school door. After seeing Luca enter through the school door, Marisol's maternal concern transformed into an overwhelming but curious curiosity. When she turned her attention to the man on the sidewalk, she didn't see him. He had disappeared. Luca and I were going crazy. She thought it had been weeks since her husband had died. Maybe the lack of him was affecting their minds in the end. Of the day, Marisol called Carla, Alejandro's only sister, asking her to stay with Luca for a few minutes. Her sister-in-law was a brilliant and busy lawyer. Therefore, Marisol avoided asking her for help despite her sister-in-law's protests. You are doing a good job alone, Marisol. But you can ask me. Oh, I'll be here, she said with her eyes fixed on Marisol's. My brother would be proud of you, said Carla, referring to the way in which Marisol took care of her son. However, Marisol had not yet gotten used to taking care of Luca alone. She had just started her vacation from her job as a cleaner, so it was good that she had the next few weeks to adjust to the new life, since she was still getting used to the routine of being a single mother, especially since she couldn't be sad in front of her son, and she needed to be strong all the time. Marisol just wanted a few minutes to walk and get rid of the sad thoughts. I can't cry in front of Luca. I need to be strong to walk. He will help me, she thought as she left the house. However, after a few meters ahead, the crying took over. Marisol, I miss you, Alejandro cried, looking towards the street. Suddenly looking towards the alley at the end of the street, Marisol saw Alejandro, her husband, entering a dark place. In an automatic gesture, she walked towards him, feeling her heart jump in the chest. I could only be going crazy, she thought to herself. However, the man turned towards her and his eyes were attentive to Marisol. "I'm sorry. I couldn't help but notice. You look a lot like someone I know," she said, trying to hide her trembling. In her voice, the man was dressed in the same clothes that she had seen earlier near Luca's school a few blocks away. "I hope you are Alejandro," she wished in her thoughts. He even wore her husband's perfume. "He has to be my Alejandro," she thought. The man looked at her with an enigmatic expression. His gray eyes widened as if he recognized Marisol and was trying to hide it. "It's curious that you say that," his soft but firm voice responded. "I can't remember much about my past. I suffered an accident and lost my memory. But there is something about you that seems familiar to me." Somehow those words hit Marisol like a lightning bolt. "How do you not remember yourself?" she asked, surprise overcoming her reserve. "You don't know who you are." He ran his hand through his hair, seeming to struggle with the fog of his thoughts. "Own memories? It's complicated. I woke up in a hospital a few months ago without any memory of my life. The doctors said it was a miracle that I survived the accident I had. But as for remembering who I am, or who I was, it's still a mystery." Marisol absorbed her words, understanding the emotional weight of what he had just revealed. "And do you think you know me?" she asked, hope and fear dancing in her heart. There were some differences in the man's face that were different from her. Alexander, her husband, didn't have a glow cruel in the eyes like the stranger, plus the angle of the face was different. "Do you remember anything else?" she asked, feeling crazy for thinking they could be the same person. "I don't know. In fact, I just moved to the neighborhood, so maybe it's just a trick of my own mind." Trying to fill in the gaps. "I'm sorry," he apologized, looking disturbed. "I have to go," he said before starting to run away from Marisol, as if she were a ghost dropping a document from his pocket. Marisol tried to call him, but he ignored her. "You dropped your document," she screamed, but the man continued running. She looked at her hands and observed the name printed on the paper. "Rigo Salazar," read aloud while looking at the photo. She wondered why they looked so similar. However, what couldn't come out of Marisol's head was that the man, upon seeing her, acted as if he recognized her. How is that possible? He thought, determined to investigate. Marisol returned home with Rigo's identity in her hands. She was flooded by a tide of confusion and curiosity. The unexpected meeting and the surprising physical similarities between Rigo and her deceased husband Alejandro had planted a seed of doubt in her heart. Could it be possible? She shook her head, trying to get rid of the absurd thought that Alejandro and Rigo could be the same person. Marisol knew it sounded crazy, but perhaps if Alejandro had suffered an accident, the surgery could have slightly changed the features of his face. No, it cannot be. However, a doubt remained since she did not have the opportunity to say goodbye to her husband. He had been murdered during his work as a police officer. Crime so cruel that she couldn't say goodbye. It's better that she saw my husband only in life, she thought. But this made everything make sense since Marisol had not seen her husband dead. With that persistent doubt hammering in her mind, she went to Alejandro's office, determined to find an explanation for something that the police had overlooked about her husband's death. The office still had Alejandro's scent from weeks ago, as if his perfume was still impregnated with the old paper. She began to search among Alejandro's work documents, hoping to find something that could clarify his doubts about Rigo Alazer. It was then that Marisol surprisingly found a false background on the desk. There was a folder discreetly marked with the Rigo's name. Her heart was beating hard as she looked through the documents and photos that revealed that Alejandro knew Rigo, or maybe they are the same person. Marisol carefully observed the photos of Rigo, noticing small differences that stopped them from the perfect image of Alejandro in her memory. A look a little harder here, a slightly different face angle there. Yet the similarity was undeniable. The documents suggested that her husband was involved in something dangerous, possibly related to the motive. Why Alejandro had died. On one of the papers there was a photo of Alejandro, but the name printed on the paper was Rigo, suggesting that he used this name as if it were his own. Was Alejandro protecting Rigo, Or was he protecting himself by using his name, she asked, more confused than ever. The possibility that Alejandro was alive somewhere, perhaps suffering from amnesia as Rigo had suggested, was an idea she couldn't completely rule out, no matter how hard she tried, determined to find out. The truth is, Marisol knew that she needed to find Rigo again. I need answers, her spirit decided, driven both by the need to close the wounds of the past and by the hope, however fragile it was, that Alejandro could somehow be alive if Rigo really suffered from such amnesia. Maybe there was a chance, no matter how slim, to unravel the mysteries that surrounded Alejandro's last days and the true identity of Rigo Salazar. The next day, after dropping off her beloved son at school, Marisol was to the address she found in Alejandro's papers. I must continue this pursuit, she thought, fearing that she was losing her lucidity. I cannot remain with this doubt, she decided upon. Entering an old building, Marisol took her husband's old weapon in her bag, remembering that he said that she had the hands of a pastry chef and should never have a gun. Now she saw that Alejandro was right about that, but she wouldn't go into a place with an unprotected criminal, although everything pointed to her husband being involved with the criminal organization. Marisol still trusted him enough to not believe it, even though all the documents seemed to indicate that he had lied. My Alejandro would not commit a crime and deceive me this way, she thought as she rang the doorbell. The hollow sound of the doorbell echoed through the empty hallway, increasing the tension that Marisol felt. She waited with her heart beating hard, but there was no answer. The door remained closed, a silent obstacle between her and the answers she was desperately seeking. Perhaps no one is in house, she thought, considering her next steps. However, something inside her refused to return home without trying one more time. Marisol was about to ring the doorbell again when a neighbor came out of an apartment on the other side of the corridor and looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and caution, taking advantage of the Marisol approached. Sorry for the inconvenience. I'm looking for Rigo Salazar. Do you know if he lives here? She asked, trying to appear as calm as possible. The neighbor looked at her for a moment before answering. Rigo moved out last night in a hurry. He said something about having to leave quickly. He didn't give any details. The tone of his voice suggested that he wasn't surprised by Rigo's sudden departure, but he also didn't have any more information to offer. Marisol felt a wave of frustration and desperation. Rigo was gone, as well as the opportunity to find answers about Alejandro and the strange connections that seemed to unite them. She thanked the neighbor, who seemed in a hurry to get to work. As soon as she was alone in the hallway again, she remembered that her husband taught her to open doors with a latch. On that occasion, she had lost her key and was left outside for hours. When she got home, the husband taught her how to solve it, so she wouldn't have to stay in the sun for so long again, always worried about her well-being. I have to know the truth, she murmured, looking over her shoulders to make sure that she was already alone and that the neighbor would not return, before removing the barrette from her hair and opening Rigo's door with ease inside the apartment. Marisol felt a mixture of adrenaline and fear. The space was silent, as if it kept the secrets that she was desperately looking for. The place was disorganized, with signs of a hasty departure, papers scattered on the table, some clothes thrown on a chair, and a half-finished cup of coffee now cold on the kitchen counter. She knew what she was hiding. Something murmured. Marisol began to search the apartment, meticulously looking for anything that could shed light on the connection between Rigo and Alejandro. It was then that she found a suitcase with a small diary. The first few minutes, pages were full of notes that seemed to be coded, impossible to decipher immediately. But as she continued looking through the diary, she found something that made her freeze. There was a photo of Alejandro, clearly taken years ago. He was smiling with a happy appearance next to the photo. An annotation with the handwriting: her husband's mission becoming dangerous as he insists that we can trust each other with our lives. I hope he's right. Marisol felt the ground shift beneath her feet at the revelation that Alejandro knew Rigo so intimately, and that they had shared some kind of dangerous mission was a piece of the puzzle that she never expected to find out what they were doing. Alejandro murmured, tears starting to form in her eyes. Finding out that her husband had a secret life that perhaps led to his death was almost too much to bear there in the apartment. He also found many forged documents from other people, proof of a fraudulent gang there were photos of victims and possible documents. How could I trust you? Alejandro, with the diary in his hands, Marisol knew that he needed help to decipher the coded notes. She thought about Lucas, remembering how Alejandro loved teaching her to solve puzzles. Maybe there is a message here that he wanted her to find. She reflected, feeling determined to move forward despite the pain. Marisol continued searching until she saw a photo of her son and began to shake. She stared at Luca's photo, a wave of emotion engulfing her like a storm. The photograph was taken clearly, without her knowing. It showed Luca playing in the park, the innocent joy of a child stamped on his face. Why is this photo here? She wondered, barely able to formulate the thought. The presence of that image of her son in that apartment in the hiding place. Rigo's discovery was a revelation that brought with it a new level of fear and concern. Why Rigo would have a photo of Luca? He wondered, his heart beating uncontrollably. The discovery raised alarming questions about his son's safety and the true nature of his son. The relationship between Rigo, the idea that Luca could be in any way involved or in danger due to her husband's secret actions was unbearable. With the decision to protect Luca at all costs, Marisol carefully kept the photo along with the diary. She knew that, I couldn't ignore the discovery. If they hurt my son, I'll finish them off, she told herself, furious like a lioness defending her cub. This motivated her to photograph everything that was there as she continued her search through the apartment. Marisol found a pen drive hidden inside a table clock. She instinctively understood that this device could contain crucial information about the mission mentioned in the diary and possibly explain the connection between Rigo and Alejandro. With the diary, the photo of Luca, and the pen drive in Marisol's hand, I knew that the next stage of his search would require caution and cunning. I need to be smart about this. I can't put Luca or myself in more danger, he thought, already planning how to access the information on the flash drive safely and who could help her decipher the coded entries in the diary. The search for the truth about her husband had transformed into a determination to protect her son. Nothing was more important than keeping Luca safe. However, everything seemed increasingly dangerous than I anticipated. I'm going to find out what you were trying to tell me. It's not possible that you've always lied to me, she said, more determined than ever to follow the clues he had left behind, no matter how dark or deep they were. No matter how deep was against her husband. Marisol couldn't believe that the man she loved was capable of something so bad that it involved her son. She remembered all the nice words that Alejandro said. Trust in yourself, you'll make it, she exclaimed when she told him that her dream was to have her own bakery. Her friends used to make fun of her for being a maid who wanted to have her own sweet shop, even when it seemed impossible. Alejandro believed in her and told her sweet words. How could he be a criminal? Suddenly the light. The apartment went dark, as if someone had turned off the building's main switch. The sudden darkness engulfed the apartment, leaving Marisol immobilized by the shock. She barely had time to process the change before she felt a hand press firmly against her mouth, silencing any scream that might escape. His heart soared, fear running through his veins like ice, and then that voice, a voice he knew better than his own, whispering dangerously close to his ear. Goals in this, Marisol, go home, I love you, my love. Those words, spoken in Alejandro's voice, sent waves of confusion and despair through Marisol. How could it be possible? She squirmed, trying to free herself, but the hands that held her were too strong, and then so suddenly as the hands had arrived, they released her and silence fell over the dark apartment again. I'm crazy, she thought as she tried to see her husband in the middle of the darkness. Marisol stood still for a moment, trying to catch her breath. Heart beating uncontrollably in his chest, Alejandro whispered in the dark apartment, But there was no response. As his eyes began to adjust to the darkness, he frantically searched for any sign of her presence, but she was alone, and to his horror he realized that the photo of Luca that he panic and desolation washed over her as the reality of the situation set in. Her husband's voice, the photo of her son missing. All of which meant that the situation was much more dangerous and personal than she had thought. That she could never have imagined. Marisol felt stunned, betrayed, and incredibly alone in the darkness. She needed to get out of there, and quickly, with trembling hands, Marisol put the pen drive in her bag, determined to leave the apartment before whoever it was came back. However, she instinctively picked it up. Everything I found, and putting it in the bag to have proof. I have to take my son out of school. It's not safe anymore, he thought, a fierce determination replacing fear. However, collect all the documents in the dark took longer than he would have liked. Every cell in his body wanted to run home with Luca to the safety of his son, but he needed to have something against those criminals in case they tried something against his little one. By searching for Luca, in a few hours later, the school realized that something was wrong. The children were playing in the playground under the scattered supervision of the teachers, but Luca was not among them. Her quick pace became a race to the teacher's room where she was received. With an expression of surprise and concern, her heart was already beating at an alarming rate. Marisol, I thought Luca had already gone home. Her husband came to look for him a few minutes ago, said the teacher, clearly oblivious to the storm that those words would unleash. My husband's voice. Marisol was a strangled whisper, her worst suspicions coming to life. This can't be happening, she thought with her heart racing. Alejandro had died for weeks, but with so many problems on her mind, she had forgotten to notify the school about the event without losing a single moment. Second more, Marisol ran out of the school, panic and desperation directing her steps. She had barely processed the situation when her cell phone rang. With trembling hands, she answered, and a distorted voice filled her ears whose words cut her heart with surgical precision. Marisol, if you continue looking for answers, your Luca, he won't be safe. Give up now, and he will come home safely, he said, making Marisol's world collapse around her. The fear of losing her son was overwhelming. She continued her search for him. The truth about Alejandro risking Luca's safety would be impossible. Nothing was more important to her than her son, but she knew that her husband, if he were alive, was in trouble. The decision was torturous, a weight she never imagined having to bear. And if Alejandro is alive and in problems, she could lose him again to these criminals. She thought, unable to believe that her husband was involved with fraud. Who are you? What do you want from us? Marisol demanded of the man on the phone, trying to control the tremor in her voice. If you do something to my son, I will end you, he threatened, feeling his chest hurt, fearing for Luca's life. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is what you do. From now on, give up Marisol for Luca. The call was cut off abruptly, leaving Marisol in a daze. Deafening silence. The options before her were cruel, and time was running out. Heartbroken, she knew what she had to do. I love you, Luca. I will keep you safe no matter what the cost, she whispered to herself, a silent promise to the son. She hoped she could keep it. Took a while. An hour of anguish, but it seemed as if time had stopped until Luca appeared at the door. Mom, I ate ice cream with Dad, he said with such joy that Marisol had to hide the fears that clouded her mind. How did my love? Asked with a trembling voice, feeling like if the ground appeared under his feet. Dad took me to the little square, and we ate ice cream. He's not in heaven anymore. Mom was happy, hugging Marisol. Luca's words, so innocent and full of joy, were like knives in Marisol's heart. The reunion with her son brought immense relief, but the circumstances under which it occurred plunged her into an abyss of uncertainty and fear. She is no longer in heaven. Mom, how could Luca speak with such certainty about seeing her father if Alejandro was dead and who he was? Then the man who posed as her husband dragging her son into the middle of this dangerous charade. The house, once a sanctuary of love and happy memories, now seemed like a prison of doubts and dark secrets. Marisol felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her from all sides. Even hugging her son. She was surrounded by friends and family who insisted that she should move on, who insisted that Alejandro had left, and that she clung to fantasias for not being able to handle her loss. When she mentioned that the circumstances of Alejandro's death, they were strange. "You're creating illusions. There's nothing wrong. He's gone. Stop distrusting everything," they said. But now with Luca talking about having seen the father, how could Marisol ignore the possibility that something was very wrong? Badly. The choice before her was torturous. If she continued searching for the truth, revealing the conspiracy that linked Alejandro Rigo Salazar and other criminals, she would be putting both herself and Luca in danger. On the other hand, retreating towards the safety of her solitude meant ignoring the questions she asked. It burned inside her to live with doubt and perhaps never know what really happened to Alejandro that night. While Luca slept peacefully, Marisol was awake, fighting with her conscience the promise of keeping her. Lucas was surely at war with his need to search for answers. What did Alejandro want to tell me? They left her completely isolated. Finally, she made a decision. Marisol couldn't just retreat. Not when there was so much at stake. She began to carefully plan her next steps, knowing that each movement from now on needed to be calculated with precision. She needed to protect Luca, but she also needed to unravel the mystery surrounding Alejandro's death. With renewed determination, Marisol decided that no matter how deep the conspiracy went or how dangerous the path was, she would find a way to deal with it. For Luca, for Alejandro, and for herself, Marisol spent the night awake, plotting a plan that could protect Luca and at the same time allow her to continue her search for the truth. He knew he needed allies, people he could trust implicitly. The first person who came to mind was Alejandro's only sister, as a lawyer with resources and an astute mind for strategies. Carla would know how to help. Although she was one of the voices insisting that Marisol to leave the past behind, Marisol was confident that when it came to Luca's safety, she would be by his side without hesitation. In the morning, Marisol ran into Carla while her son was playing in the yard and explained everything to her. Sister-in-law Rigo's appearance, the threats, Alejandro's visit that Luca mentioned, and most importantly, her determination to discover the truth. Carla listened in silence, absorbing every word, the concern evident in her eyes. "You are not alone in this, Isel. We are going to protect Luca no matter what. It's hard. I always admired you for your strength in taking care of my brother's son alone after he left. I never saw you despair, even with your pain. You managed to take care of him with love. I will help you." Finally, Carla said, her decision bringing tears to her eyes. Marisol together made a plan to keep Lucas safe, alternating his stay between trusted relatives, hiding any attempt to reach him. "But I know that your pain was very strong, so I need to warn you that my brother died. Marisol, if you go after this organization, it could be dangerous for you. Alejandro, no, can help you. He really died. If you look for these criminals, you will be in danger. You think I'm crazy, right?" Luca saw it too. Marisol argued, "I don't care that it's risky, even if you were right. True, and Andro was dead. Now I need to clear my husband's name. I can't allow that. Maybe one day he will be associated with a criminal organization," she said, feeling the tears running down her face. "And if she is right, if they somehow manage to trick us into believing that Rigo was Alejandro," she thought, confused. "I need to know the truth, Carla. No matter how painful or dangerous it is, I can't live in this uncertainty," Marisol said firmly. Wiping away her tears, she was even determined. Knowing that this decision could lead her to face forces that she did not fully understand, Carla nodded, understanding her sister-in-law's determination, but the fear for her safety was palpable. "So we will do it together, but we need to be smart. I will contact some friends who can help us investigate without calling the phone too much attention." As the two women delved deeper into the investigation, the risks became increasingly clear. Evidence began to emerge suggesting that the criminal organization, The person with whom Alejandro could have been involved was more dangerous and influential than they had imagined. Each discovery brought with it a new level of danger, and it soon became evident that they were being observed. Marisol began to search for unknown cars parked near her house and anonymous telephone calls with threats. Evenings became a daily occurrence. She memorized the number they used to call her. She didn't miss any details. She even noticed that the numbering was different from what the girls said. They contacted when Luca was taken away. However, the feeling of being constantly watched was suffocating, and the isolation from her friends and family now necessary to protect them left Marisol fighting against desolation. The deep crisis reached its climax when one night upon returning home Marisol found her riotous residence. Nothing had been stolen, but the message was clear. She was in danger, and Luca could be too if she didn't give up her search, sitting among the rubble of her daily life. Marisol faced the harshest reality. Continuing her investigation meant putting at risk not only her life, but also that of her son and the people she loved. If Luca had been home when the criminals broke in, the worst could have happened. She remembered her husband's words: when a criminal is close to being discovered, take exaggerated measures. That's how we caught them, he said once. Marisol felt that she was close to discovering the truth. That's why they came to her house. However, if she continued, she knew that everything could become an even bigger problem. Marisol knew she was making a risky decision, but she had no alternative but to report everything she had seen. She already had enough evidence to find the criminals. She compiled everything she found in the apartment on the pen drive and the documents that Alejandro left behind. However, she needed a confession so that everything would end. Also, despite feeling alone, her husband's sister helped her gather evidence, even if she did not believe that her brother was alive, and so now Marisol knew that she was alone in that. I would have to solve everything. I have to protect my family at any cost, she said determinedly. The criminal network was a very strong organization. According to the evidence, they acted throughout the country, blackmailing and falsifying documents. They even posed as important people, infiltrating the power structures to manipulate events in their favor, becoming almost untouchable due to the influence and fear they spread. Alejandro had somehow become involved with this organization or fighting against it. Secretly to dismantle, or perhaps being forced to work under her shadow with the evidence in hand and the weight of the world on her shoulders, Marisol made the call that could change everything. The number she had memorized from the previous threatening call was now her only one hotline to confront the criminal network that had turned his life upside down and apparently involved Alejandro in ways he was still struggling to understand. They need to be stopped so Luca is safe, Marisol whispered to herself while dialing the number with trembling fingers. The man on the other end of the line tried to threaten her, but Marisol was not intimidated and agreed to meet with him to hand over everything she had against them. They can kill me, she thought, but there was no turning back. She couldn't allow them. Did something against her son, and to tarnish her husband's name. Then Marisol, at the height of her strength, prayed to God, Lord, please, make sure that no harm happens to me or Luca. I know they are dangerous, but I have your protection, she prayed, feeling a strength. Major sees her upon arriving at the designated place, a forgotten and gloomy area of the city. Marisol felt her heart beating strongly against her chest. She turned on the listening device that Alejandro's sister had given her and proceeded towards the darkness. Lord, protect me, she asked. That's when she asked. She felt a hand grab her firmly and pull her into the darkness before she could scream. She saw who Alejandro was, alive in front of her. The shock and joy of seeing him again were almost too much for Marisol. But before she could fully process the situation, Alejandro pulled her towards him and gave her a passionate kiss. She had no doubt who he was. She would recognize that kiss, even if everything around her ceased to exist. I have a lot to explain, my love, but now we need to be quick, Alejandro said, his voice full of urgency and relief to see her. Marisol couldn't believe what she saw. It's you, Alejandro, I can't believe it, she said, feeling her eyes fill with tears, her heart racing, and the love that flooded her was so that she would understand that this was the first time. When I saw her husband, I was a fool. How could I believe that Rigo could be Alejandro? There was no way to deny that her heart came to life when she saw her husband in front of her. You are alive, my love. I'm not crazy, she said both to herself and to her husband. Before any more words could be exchanged, their presence was detected. Men that Marisol recognized from the photos on the flash drive appeared from the shadows, clearly ready to prevent any truth from being revealed in an act of desperate courage to protect Marisol. Alejandro advanced towards the criminals. "Run, Marisol, protect Luca," were his last words before a gunshot rang through the air in the chaos that followed. Marisol saw Alejandro fight with the men, but then he and the criminals disappeared into the darkness, running one after another with weapons in hand, leaving them alone, terrified and confused. The silence that followed was deafening. Marisol, now more than ever, she feared having lost Alejandro again. Desperation and uncertainty enveloped her. As she fled to safety, Alejandro's words swirling in her head, now more than ever she was determined to unmask the criminals and uncover the truth behind Alejandro's involvement, not only to protect her family, but to honor the sacrifice he seemed willing to make. To do for them, fearful but driven by a strength that she did not know she possessed. Marisol went directly to the police station where Alejandro had worked, determined to expose everything she knew about the criminal network, taking with her not only the evidence gathered but also the weight of a desperate hope to save Alejandro and Luca. The police's decision to demand a final showdown sounded both like a death sentence and a chance to end that madness once and for all. Before it could formalize her plan with the police, Marisol's phone rang, a cold and calculating voice on the other end of the line. She claimed to be with Alejandro and Luca. "If you want them to live, you will have to hand over everything you discovered," the voice demanded, but she heard her son scream in the background and Marisol's world stopped. The air left her lungs and an icy terror took hold of her, but at the same time a fierce determination filled her. She would not bow to their demands. She would find a way to save them. With the police at her side, Marisol developed a risky plan. She would make the delivery, but under her conditions, ensuring that the police were ready to intervene and capture the criminals. Saving Alejandro and Luca, it was a dangerous game, one that put her at risk. But Marisol, she was willing to do anything to save her family. It was early morning when Marisol went to the agreed place, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The darkness was dense, but she knew she would help the police hide while holding a briefcase firmly. Fake, supposedly containing the evidence, was advancing towards the interior of the warehouse. He had barely entered the vast and echoing space when he saw figures moving in the darkness. Then Alejandro was pushed towards the light visibly. Wounded but alive, Marisol almost ran towards him but held back, remembering the plan. However, when she saw her little son in the hands of those men, her legs gave out. "My little Luca," cried when she saw her little boy. It was torture, not being able to touch him, knowing that he was there so close and yet so unreachable. "Let go of my son and I will hand everything over to you," Marisol demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. Rigo emerged from the shadows, smiling. The sound of his laughter sent shivers down Marisol's spine. "Who are you?" "To decide something. We are the owners of this city. Do you think you will get someone to believe you?" he scoffed. "Return the evidence." "Why did you do this?" asked Marisol, trying to see her son, but it was too dark for her vision to capture anything because Alejandro didn't want to cooperate. He should have done it. Rigo didn't ask about someone in the family. Looking at Alejandro, Marisol was confused because she knew her husband's entire family and had never seen such a man until the last few weeks. "You didn't tell her the truth," Alejandro said, he turning to Marisol. "He is my brother, even though our father abandoned me and pretended that I did not exist when I set up this organization, and the police discovered I asked him for his help, but he turned his back on his own blood. I will not let you finish what I built," he finished, leaving Marisol in shock. "Please let go of my son," she asked. Looking into Luca's gray eyes, however, Rigo smiled. "This little guy here knew that my sister had helped you, and imagine my surprise when I found your Luca in home. He was the first to see me, smart boy. He tried to run to call his aunt, but I was faster," Rigo concluded, smiling. "Why did you lie? Why did you pretend to be Alejandro?" asked Marisol, remembering when she saw him. She needed to know if he had really died. The only person she knew, the one who would tell him the truth, would be you. "So I pretended to be him to see if you would say something, but you didn't know anything. However, I was wrong since you started investigating me right after seeing us," he said, throwing an irritated look at Marisol. "Now, because of you curiosity, I'll have to kill all of you. You know too much," he finished, first pointing the gun at Marisol. It was then that everything happened very quickly. Signals were given, and the police broke into the warehouse, running. Chaos set in while Marisol ran towards Luca to save him. However, shots rang out. The warehouse. Marisol felt her heart stop for a moment. She saw Alejandro fighting one of the kidnappers, his every movement marked by a savage determination to protect her. She and Luca, and then in the middle of the tumult, she saw Luca running towards her, arms outstretched, without fully understanding the danger, but knowing only that she wanted to be with her mother. The confrontation was full of shouted orders and the dull sound of bodies fighting. Marisol managed to grab Luca, protecting him with his own body, while frantically looking over Alejandro, trying to make sure he was safe too. When the police finally arrested all the men, she cried, "Thank you, my God, for take care of my family," she prayed as she hugged Luca tight to her, feeling the tears of relief and gratitude wet her face. Alejandro joined them, his arms wrapping his family in a hug that Marisol never wanted to end. "We're together now. That's all I can do." "It doesn't matter," Alejandro whispered, kissing Luca's head and then Marisol's lips. The police told Alejandro that they had everything they needed to put Rigo and his accomplices behind bars. So the family headed. At home, Marisol still couldn't believe that her husband was alive. She was looking at him as if he were going to disappear. "I love you, my love." "I'm fine," Alejandro said every time he felt Marisol's worried look. "He knew we would make it," she said, relieved that they were safe. Carla, Alejandro's sister, was already at home waiting for them, relief and concern clearly visible on her face. "I am very sorry for not having arrived sooner to prevent Rigo from taking Luca. He invaded my house. He probably discovered that we were investigating and took our child," he cried, hugging his nephew. "He would never forgive me if something had happened to him," he said, tears running down his eyes as he joined the family hug. Alejandro took advantage of the moment of calm to explain the inexplicable. "I needed to fake my death to protect to everyone," began his voice full of pain and regret. "I spent my entire life believing that I only had one sister. I could never have imagined that our father was able to hide such important information. It was a common day at work when Rigo approached me. He was a criminal, asking me to help him make an investigator from another police station stop investigating him. I started to approach him and pretended that I would help his organization for evidence, but he discovered that I was investigating Rigo's organization. It was very cruel. They blackmail everyone and kill those they couldn't manipulate. I knew you would be at risk, so faking my death was the only way I found to keep you safe while I collected the evidence necessary to knock them down." Marisol listened, trying to absorb every word, and Luca asked with a trembling voice, "It was you who took him to the square?" she asked without understanding. Alejandro nodded his head. "The last thing I wanted was to involve our son in this, but I knew he was at risk, so I wanted to scare you so that you would stop investigating, because I knew what Rigo was capable of. When he found out that I was alive, he went after you. So I needed to scare you, so that you would hide and do the same with Luca." Alejandro explained, holding Marisol's hand tightly. "I warned you in the building that you needed to stop investigating," he said, but smiled. "Still, I'm glad you didn't listen to me, my love. You saved all of us. You saved our family. I love you, my love. I owe you my life. Without you, there is no life," she answered, crying. Alejandro's words infiltrated his wife's heart against all odds. Marisol had fought for her family by ending the criminal network and bringing Alejandro back to them. Now with the truth revealed and justice prevailing, they could begin to rebuild their lives as a family in the days that followed. As the dust settled and normality began to return, Marisol, Alejandro, and Luca spent the days together, strengthening the ties that united them. They visited the park where Luca had talked about having ice cream with his father, this time as a complete family without fears or secrets stalking me that I will never leave you again, my love, Alejandro said to Marisol as they watched Luca play nothing more of secrets, nothing more of darkness. As Marisol's life, Alejandro and Luca stabilize after the tumultuous events, they found reasons to celebrate new beginnings. Marisol, with the determination that had guided her through the shadows, finally realized her dream of opening her own bakery called Sweet Hopes. The store quickly became a point of light in the community, a place where Marisol's recipes filled the air with sweet promises and esperanza. Every cake, every sweet was a celebration of his journey from darkness to light, from despair to joy. Alejandro, in turn, was recognized for his bravery and dedication in dismantling the criminal network. Along with his wife, Marisol's efforts were mentioned in a ceremony at the police station. Alejandro received a Medal of Honor, a symbol of gratitude and recognition for his sacrifice and courage. His colleagues who once mourned his loss were now celebrating his return and his achievements. Alexander accepted the honor with humility, pointing out that who deserved the medal. It was his wife, knowing that the real prize was being able to be next to his family, free from the shadows of the past. Alejandro's sister Carla was by his side in these moments of celebration, her presence a constant reminder of the support and unconditional love that helped them overcome the challenges. The union of the family was never so strong, and the ties that kept them together were indestructible. One sunny afternoon, Marisol and Alejandro held a small party at the bakery to celebrate the medal, Alejandro's honor, and the success of Marisol's new venture. Friends, family, and clients gathered together, sharing laughter and stories, while Luca happily ran among them, his laughter filling the space with pure happiness. Who would have thought? Alejandro said to Marisol, his arm around her, as they watched the celebration. Around all the battles we have faced here, we are stronger and more united than ever. Marisol smiled, her head resting on Alejandro's shoulder. We did it together, she responded, and while let us be together, I know that there is nothing we cannot face. And so, between sweet flavors and shared memories, Marisol and Alejandro looked towards the future, knowing that love, courage, and hope were the true ingredients for a happy and full life. They had found their sweet victory not only in Marisol's pastry shop or Alejandro's medal, but in the simple fact of being able to be together as a family, facing whatever the future has in store for them. If you like this story, we invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next amazing narrative that is about to appear on your screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Now, you can click on the links that are appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, full of valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. Until then,